I'm Mark Beardsley with EcoMetrics. I'm here to talk to you about my recent passion project to employ the principle of charity to understand concerns with beaver and wetland restoration. 2 years ago, Jessica presented this hypothetical case of partnering with beavers to restore a wetland. In part one of this series, she described the process-based mindset that led us to this approach. In part two, Ben Jackson showed us how that played out when we did the work for real and how we've been monitoring the response. Here's the site before treatment, and hereafter mimicking beavers. And now, after beavers took over. Clearly, we can restore degraded wetland. The question I address in part 3 isn't about where or how to restore wetland, it's about whether we should restore it at all, because there's some controversy about it. Of course, I personally think we should. I stand with Aldo Leopold, who pleaded for a land ethic back in the 1940s. A thing is right, he says, when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It's wrong when it tends otherwise. I'm also motivated to restore wetlands for the plants, animals, and other biodiverse life forms that rely on them, like in Tori Ritter's collage of Rocky Mountain wetland-dependent species. I believe we're obliged to take care of these critters, both for their own sake and for the sake of future generations of people. The pragmatic values that restored wetlands offer people aren't lost on me either. People who study these systems and do restoration, while we're all familiar with how they provide resilience to wildfire, drought, and flood, how they promote water quality and nutrient cycling, sequester carbon, create fish and wildlife habitat, support biodiversity, and of course, how beautiful they can be. I don't need to sing to this choir about all the reasons we should restore wetlands. I'm here to help you understand why some people think maybe we shouldn't restore them. To me, this is a beautiful scene, but to others it looks like a mess of inefficiency. The restoration of complex wetlands from simple stream channels makes a lot of people nervous, and I'm here to present their concerns, because taking opposing views seriously is a door to learning and a first step to working together. Jessica took you on a deep dive into the sea of linguistics. I hope you caught your breath while Ben talked about science, because we're about to take another philosophical dive into metacognition. We like to think our opinions and beliefs follow directly from objective evidence, carefully weighed to form logical conclusions. But decades of psychological research suggests otherwise. We're not as rational as we think. Psychologist Jonathan Haidt explains how reasoning follows behind intuition when it comes to forming beliefs. He uses a funny metaphor. Intuition, he says, is like an elephant, and reason is the rider. The rational part of our brain plays less of a role directing our beliefs, and more of a role justifying them after the fact. Confirmation bias is our natural tendency to seek out and interpret evidence in ways that confirm what we already think. I know I'm guilty of it, and I won't cast judgment on you, but psychology research suggests pretty strongly that you are too. We're all strongly motivated to seek evidence for our side, eager to accept it, and enthusiastic to share it with others. And we're all equally motivated not to seek evidence against our side. We're disinclined to believe it when it's shown to us, and less likely to share it. This profound double standard seems to be rigged into the way the human brain works. Most of it's subconscious. We're all good at challenging statements made by other people, but we treat our own beliefs like prized possessions, our children almost, which makes us want to protect them for fear of losing them. Attachment to our beliefs is especially strong on questions of morality. The beliefs that motivate me to restore a wetland, the ones I went through earlier in this talk, intrinsic value of nature, ecosystem support of biodiversity, and the myriad instrumental benefits that wetlands perform for people. Well, these are strong moral convictions, and you can bet they come with a hefty dose of confirmation bias. Hearing evidence in favor of wetland restoration makes me feel good. It triggers a dose of dopamine in my brain. And even though I want to be rational and impartial about it, I admit I feel a little agitated when people offer reasons against it. It makes me uncomfortable. My instinct is to immediately think of ways to reject them. If the girls in green are for wetland restoration and the girls in blue have opinions against it, it's easy for me to make friends with the greenies who think like I do, and to avoid the blueies who might challenge my beliefs. Developing an us versus them mentality is the first step down a hopeless and unconstructive path. So let's not go there. Navigating complex problems is something we're better off doing together, and this is where the principle of charity comes in. It's an antidote to biased thinking. It's basically a golden rule for communication that says we should argue unto others the way we would like to be argued with. That means putting aside our own views to understand the other person before automatically rejecting them. You have to internalize their beliefs and repeat them in the best possible light so that you know you've got it. And more importantly, so that they know you've got it. If it's something they care about, they're not going to let you get away with building a straw man of their case. Helping them build a Steelman version builds mutual understanding and trust, and that's what I'm here for. A loyal member of the green team laying out a Steelman version of the blue team's concerns, as they were expressed to me in conversations this winter. I started this talk out with a time lapse showing how this wetland was restored with beavers. Now let's go backwards. Before beavers reoccupied, and back to the original condition before we did treatment. As Ben's talk showed, wetland restoration is a story of re-wetting a dried riverscape. Consider the data he showed us, starting with the condition before treatment, now with a modest increase after beaver mimicry, and again after beavers reoccupied the site. The dark blue wedge here shows the volume that was filled to restore wetland. It's helpful to use real numbers, and we have enough data for at least a ballpark estimate. If we make some coarse assumptions and take the average height of water increase times porosity times the area of the site, we get about 8 acre-feet. The water to fill this volume came from upstream. So, while the wetland was refilling, the flows downstream had to be less than if we had left the site alone. Filling 8 acre-feet over 6 months would decrease summertime flows by about 0.03 CFS on average. Wetland restoration also presumably comes with an annual increase in evapotranspiration, since we have more water exposed to air and more plant biomass transpiring. Here we are before treatment with about 0.6 acres of surface water. After mimicry with about 0.8 acres, and after beavers returned with about 3.6. If we assume 2 feet per year increase in annual ET rate, and multiply that by the 3 acre increase in surface water area, we get a ballpark estimate of about 6 acre-feet of additional ET per year. That might translate to a streamflow decrease of about 0.02 CFS each summer. Having real data like this should help move the discussion forward. So we're working with CWCB and Professor Joel Schultes from Mesa University to hone our methods and get more precise numbers from this and other similar project sites. The main thing that I think the blue team would want us to understand is that it takes water to restore a wetland, and that restored wetlands have increased evapotranspiration losses compared to degraded sites. The blue team's concern is that that water has to come from somewhere, and somebody may already have a legal right to use it downstream. The Steelman version of their case, in a nutshell, is that wetland restoration may result in decreased stream flow. And if decreased stream flow makes it harder for someone downstream to exercise their right to take water, then we may have a conflict. When there's conflict, the principle of charity says to engage conversation, but not with a statement like, hey, here's why I think you're wrong, but rather with a question, why do you think you're right? So, here goes. The system Colorado uses for water administration originated during the gold rush with miners who regularly diverted water for their operations. Like this happy miner, number 1. Hey, what gives, man? Miner number 1 isn't so happy now that miner number 2 is diverting upstream, leaving him with diminished flows. Prior appropriation, which is the foundation of Colorado water law, it was put in place to prevent miners and eventually all other water users from coming to blows over disputes like this. In Colorado, anyone has a right to file a claim for water as long as they have a beneficial use of it. The catch is that you can only use the water you claim after all the other rights filed before you have been satisfied. So here, user number 1 gets to take the water he needs, and user number 2 has to hold off until number 1's needs are met. If there's plenty of water, both users can take their share. But when the supply drops again, number 2 has to stop taking until number 1's priority right is satisfied. The Colorado Division of Water Resources, their engineers and commissioners have the often thankless job of making sure nobody takes water when it's not their turn. If you really want to understand the blue team's case, walk a mile in her shoes. Water rights are like property that can be bought, sold, and transferred, and the priority date goes with it. In this example, a farmer now has priority to divert water for agriculture. And here a municipality uses water to support people in a city. The breadth of beneficial uses is so important that it's even reflected in our basketball team logos. Go Nuggets! But in all seriousness, the point is the Colorado water law covers obvious human uses, but it never contemplated keeping track of natural uses like evapotranspiration or the rise and fall of water in wetlands. In this drawing, I show evapotranspiration as the dashed arrows. The brown spot near the top is a degraded wetland we might want to restore. Restoring a degraded wetland takes water to refill it, and ET rates will probably go up, as we just went through. If either of these natural uses cause stream flow to drop enough so that a downstream user's ability to take his or her share is impaired, well, the law isn't clear about what to do in that case, and this is the problem. Even if the benefits of a restored wetland greatly outweigh what a single user might get from his or her right to use water, you can't just take something that belongs to somebody else. It's not right legally or ethically. That's what the blue team says, and I agree. Their concern is founded on moral convictions for citizens' rights, and those convictions are on par with the environmental moral convictions that the green team and I share. But that doesn't necessarily put us at odds, because it's not all one way or the other. Coloradans can find ways to realize the environmental benefits of restored wetlands while respecting citizens' rights to use water for beneficial use. I'm confident of this because I see it happen all the time. And every time, it stems from people working together with mutual respect. This is what the principle of charity does. It doesn't force everyone to agree on all points, but it does force us to consider all viewpoints and to work together. It forces us to lay our cards on the table, face up, so both sides can easily see what we disagree on and why. It also helps us see all the things we agree on. When we break down the barriers separating us versus them and start working together, we often realize that it's not a zero-sum game where opposing sides compete by scoring points against each other. The principle of charity helps us see the full range of values and constraints before us. It opens our eyes to compromise and win-win situations. When I first started talking about my Principle of Charity passion project, I faced a fair bit of cynicism. Even some of my best friends told me I was wasting my time. Those people don't care about wetlands or ecology or wildlife, they said. Likewise, I'm sure that folks from that group had a caricature version of me and my wetland-loving friends as people who don't care about water rights. Well, I'm happy to report that my experience was quite the opposite. With few exceptions, I was welcomed with open arms and open minds. None of the folks I talked to were fundamentally opposed to restoring wetlands, and all of them seemed to care. Our talks reinforced my respect for water rights and the scarcity of this precious resource. If I, the greenest of the green team, can so easily sit down and have constructive conversations with the bluest of the blue, well, I think that's proof our differences aren't so great. We all know the worn out quip that Mark Twain actually never said: whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting over. Well, I think that's hogwash. At least the second part, anyway. I mean, we can still drink, but we don't need to fight. Colorado's water community has a proud history of working together to solve complex problems. I don't think this wetland issue is a particularly challenging exception. I'm sure we can incorporate the full scope of citizens' rights and environmental values so long as we work together, as we usually do, guided by the principle of charity. Thank you.